She always seems fine until you look closer and realize her smile is just armor. What if everything you admire about her strength is actually hiding the pain no one ever asked about? Have you ever caught that flicker? That brief, almost imperceptible hesitation in her eyes before she answers. The way her voice dips for just a second before she continues speaking. You wouldn't call it fear. Not exactly. But it's there. That pause, that tremble, that moment where something inside her pulls back just slightly, like she's bracing for something you might not even say. That's not just insecurity, that's shadow. Carl Jung believed that the shadow is made of everything we once were, everything we were told not to be, and everything we still are but can't quite admit. It's the silent container of rejection, humiliation, and the parts of ourselves we've learned to edit out to survive. And for her, the fear of rejection lives deep within that container. But it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it disguises itself as politeness, as casual distance, as silence at the wrong moment. Sometimes it dresses up as strength. Other times, it's in the way she apologizes before asking for something small, as if her needs might be too much, as if her presence requires permission. When you notice that quiet pulse beneath her smile, you're witnessing something holy, because what you're seeing isn't weakness. You're seeing the shadow trying to protect her. It started early, long before you showed up. Maybe it began with a parent who withheld affection when she cried too loud or got too messy. Maybe it was a teacher who praised her only when she was perfect. Maybe it was the boy who ghosted her after she got vulnerable, or the friend who used her secrets as weapons. It doesn't take much for a girl to learn that being too real is dangerous. So she starts to smile through it. She learns how to read a room before she enters it. She becomes the master of emotional self-regulation, not because she wants to be, but because she has to be. And now, you're here. You don't know all of that. You weren't there for those small wounds that became belief systems, but you feel it, in her softness, in her self-editing, in the way she sometimes searches your face for approval without meaning to. She doesn't want to be rejected, not just by you, by anyone, because in the deep layers of the unconscious, rejection doesn't mean they didn't like me. It means I am unlovable. Jung said that the psyche seeks wholeness above all else, but wholeness can't happen when parts of ourselves are exiled, and the fear of rejection is one of the most deeply exiled parts of the feminine experience. She doesn't talk about it. She doesn't have to. It shows up in the way she laughs a little too hard at a joke that hurts, in the way she waits a beat too long to answer a compliment, unsure whether to receive or deflect. It's there when she asks if you're okay for the third time, not because you seem off, but because she's terrified it might be her. Rejection isn't just a moment, it's a memory. It's a composite of all the times she felt invisible, compared, discarded, and her nervous system remembers it all. You might just be talking about dinner plans, but her body's reading your tone like it's a survival manual. Is this safe? Is this connection? Am I still wanted? And here's the thing. You can't fix it. You can't say the perfect line that makes it disappear, because the shadow isn't something you erase, it's something you honor. So when you see that flicker in her eyes, don't rush to reassure, don't talk over it, don't make it about you. Just be still. Be present. Hold the moment. Let her know, in your silence, in your patience, in your unwavering gaze, that she doesn't have to rush to be palatable, that she doesn't have to perform to be loved. This is the map Jung was talking about. Rejection, as terrifying as it feels, is the trailhead. It shows you where the soul split from its own worth. And when you're with her, really with her, you get the rare opportunity to walk her back to herself. Not by carrying her, not by fixing her, but by seeing her exactly where she stands. And loving her there? Most people never get that far. They fall for the mask, they chase the highlight reel, they praise her strength but flinch at her softness. They tell her she's too sensitive, too intense, too emotional. But you, if you're still listening, aren't most people. You're here because you're learning to see. And when you see the fear of rejection not as a flaw, but as a symbol, a signal of unacknowledged pain, you stop reacting to it. You stop taking it personally when she withdraws. You start to understand that her distance isn't a punishment, it's a shield, a story, a scar. And when you meet that scar with compassion instead of fear, something beautiful happens. It did. She softens. Not immediately, not all at once, but over time. She stops asking if she's too much. She stops shrinking when she speaks. She starts trusting that maybe, just maybe, this connection won't end in abandonment. And Jung would say, that's when individuation begins. That's when a woman starts becoming whole again, not because someone saved her, but because someone finally stayed long enough to see her. Not the curated version. Not the convenient parts. Full of hair. Even the shadow. Even the parts she never meant to show. And if you can meet her there, if you can sit in the fire of her fear without flinching, you're not just easing her doubts, you're giving her something she's never had before, proof. Proof that rejection is no longer the end of her story. Proof that she can be loved in the places she once thought made her unworthy. Proof that even in her most fragile moments she's not alone. And in a world that taught her to smile through the ache, that proof is everything. You think she's agreeable, easy to talk to, the kind of woman who knows how to keep the peace, smooth the edges and make everyone around her feel seen. She listens, nods and smiles at the right moments. She knows when to offer comfort and when to stay quiet. But Carl Jung would caution you, don't be fooled by the surface, because what looks like kindness might just be camouflage, and what feels like warmth could be the well-rehearsed performance of a woman who has spent her life learning how to disappear in plain sight. Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to survive the world. It's not fake, it's not manipulative. It's a strategy, an adaptation, a way to move through a culture that often rewards silence over truth, compliance over complexity. For her, the persona of pleasing didn't start as a choice. It started as protection. Maybe she was taught early on that good girls don't make waves, that expressing a need was selfish, that anger was dangerous, that having boundaries meant you didn't love someone enough. Maybe her mother modeled it. Maybe her father demanded it. Maybe the world kept telling her that being liked was the highest currency she could earn, and so she earned it, relentlessly. So now, she's the one who remembers your coffee order, who texts back with a heart emoji even when she's tired, who says yes even when she's screaming no on the inside. She knows how to keep the energy smooth, how to read your tone before you even finish a sentence. You think she's low mainhead, but that's only because she's been trained not to be a burden. You don't see the self-sacrifice behind her, I'm fine. You don't hear the swallowed no behind her, whatever you prefer. But it's there, and Jung would say, this isn't her essence, it's her armor. Because when a woman has learned to please in order to be safe, her soul splits. One part becomes the diplomat, the caretaker, the sweet one. The other part gets pushed underground. That part is louder, messier, hungrier. It's the part that says, I don't want this, or I'm not okay, or that hurt me. But over time, that voice gets silenced, not just by others, but by herself. And yet, it doesn't go away. It becomes the shadow. Jung taught that the shadow holds all the parts of us we've disowned, and for the woman who's been praised for her agreeableness, her shadow is often full of unmet needs, unspoken rage, and the terrifying desire to be seen as she truly is, not filtered, not polished, not convenient. When you relate to her only through her persona, you're missing the entire truth of who she is. And maybe that works for a while, until one day she goes quiet, or she pulls away, or she explodes over something that seems small, and you're left confused, wondering what just happened. But it didn't start there. It started long before, in 100 moments when she said yes but meant no, when she smiled while swallowing grief, when she made space for everyone but herself. That's what the persona does. It keeps the connection safe but shallow. So if you want to reach her truth, her real self, you have to be brave, because seeing through the persona means seeing the parts she spent a lifetime hiding. It means noticing the sadness behind the smile. It means asking twice when she says she's okay. It means listening for what's not being said, and loving her enough to hold space for the answers that don't come wrapped in politeness. Don't mistake this for fixing her. She doesn't need fixing. She needs permission. Permission to let the mask slip, to speak without editing, to feel without fearing the consequences. She needs to know that if she shows you the parts of her that don't please you, the anger, the exhaustion, the doubt, you won't flinch. You won't punish her for it. You won't leave, because underneath the persona is a woman who's been told implicitly and explicitly that love must be earned through perfection. Jung knew that the journey to individuation, the path to wholeness, requires shedding the persona, not because it's wrong, but because it's incomplete. The persona helps us survive society, but it can never give us intimacy. It can never offer us the soul-level connection we crave. That only comes when we're brave enough to take off the mask and be loved anyway. So when she starts to drop hints, when her yes becomes hesitant, when her laughter feels forced, when she seems tired even though she won't admit it, don't ignore it. Invite her back to herself. Ask her what she wants, not just what's convenient. Tell her you want her truth, not her performance. And when she finally shares something raw, something unfiltered, something a little messy, stay. Don't correct her, don't soothe it away. Let her be complex. Let her be human. He spent enough time being digestible. What she needs now is space to be whole. And if you can offer that, you won't just connect with her, you'll awaken her. You'll help her remember that love isn't supposed to cost her identity, that she doesn't have to choose between being loved and being real. Because once a woman knows she can speak her truth and still be safe, still be cherished, still be held, something inside her changes. She softens, yes, but more importantly, she roots. She begins to stand taller, not because she's performing, but because she's finally grounded in who she is. The need to please begins to dissolve, the persona starts to crack, and from beneath that mask rises the woman she was always meant to be. Unapologetic, unfiltered, alive. And if you're still there, if you're still holding her hand when she steps into that truth, you won't just witness her transformation, you'll be part of it. She won't ask for it. She may even pretend she doesn't need it. She'll shrug it off, laugh when you compliment her, deflect with a joke or a quick change of subject. But don't let that fool you. The ache is there, quiet, constant, ancient. It's not about praise, not really, not in the way the world thinks of it. It's not about being told she's beautiful, though she may still want to hear that. It's not about validation for validation's sake. This isn't vanity. This is soul hunger. This is something Jung understood at the deepest level of the psyche. The feminine, what Jung called the anima, is the part of us that wants to be mirrored, not in some shallow, ego-driven way, but in a way that says, I see you, truly, deeply, completely. That longing is carved into her being, and when it's denied, it doesn't go away. It turns inward, it becomes doubt, insecurity, shame, or worse, silence. So when you look at her, Really look at her and speak to the things most people miss, the way she holds space for others, the bravery it takes to be soft in a hard world, the truth behind her eyes when she says she's fine. You're not just giving her attention, you're giving her reflection. You're telling her you exist, you matter, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Most people only see the surface. They see her smile, her style, her confidence, and they stop there. They offer compliments that float, hollow and disconnected. You look great, you're so sweet, you're amazing, but none of it lands, none of it sticks. Because the soul can tell the difference between being noticed and being seen. She's been noticed her whole life, but rarely has she been seen. There's a sacred difference. To be noticed is to be scanned, assessed, measured. It feels like being watched in passing, like an object, but to be seen, that's different. That's intimacy. That's someone reaching beyond the mask, beyond the performance and saying, I'm here, I'm present, I see you. And when she receives that kind of reflection, sincere, grounded, real, it doesn't just make her feel good, it wakes something up. The anima begins to stir, the shadow softens. The parts of her that have been curled inward, waiting for safety, begin to exhale. But she'll only let it happen if it's real. You can't fake this. She can feel the difference in your tone, your timing, your eyes. She knows when you're saying it because it's expected. She knows when you're offering words in exchange for something. She knows when it's a script, not a recognition. And she'll pull away if it's not authentic. Not because she's cold, but because she's protecting something sacred. Because for her, being seen is the most vulnerable thing in the world. It's more terrifying than being rejected, because if you see her, truly see her, and still leave, that confirms her worst fear, that even in her truth she's not enough. That's why so many women keep their real selves hidden, why they keep their brilliance tucked just beneath the surface. They want to be seen, but they're terrified of what it might cost. So they settle for being useful, being liked, being admired from a distance, but inside there's a quiet ache that never leaves, a whisper that says, I want someone who sees the chaos and the grace, the mess and the magic, someone who looks beyond the polish and still chooses me. That's the power of reflection. When you give her that, when you speak to her depth, her contradictions, her courage, you're giving her more than validation. You're giving her a mirror she can trust. And that changes everything. Jung believed that we find ourselves through others, that our unconscious becomes conscious when it's mirrored in relationship. For the feminine soul, that means she often meets herself through the eyes of another. So when you reflect her in a way that feels true, that's not flattery, it's integration. It's healing. It's the moment where a part of her says, oh, maybe I'm not invisible. Maybe I am worthy. Maybe I can be loved without shrinking. But here's the paradox. The more you reflect her truthfully, the less she needs your validation. Because now it's not about proving something, it's about being known. And once she feels known, the need to perform, to earn, to hustle for worth, it starts to fall away. She can just be. She can show up with her whole self. Not just the pleasing parts. Not just the curated pieces, but the entire story. That's the kind of reflection that sets a woman free. And it doesn't take poetry or grand declarations, it takes presence, it takes honesty, it takes you noticing the little things, the way her hands shake when she's nervous, the way she talks faster when she's passionate, the way she tries to hold it all together when she's falling apart inside. Name it gently, honor it without agenda, and watch her bloom. Not because you made her feel good, but because you reminded her of who she's always been. That's the magic of real reflection. It's not about changing her, it's about helping her remember. Remember the power in her voice. the beauty in her emotions, the wisdom in her body, and the truth in her longing to be seen. Because when you give a woman a mirror that doesn't distort, when you reflect her in a way that includes her light and her shadow, you're not just witnessing her, you're loving her. And in that love, the ache begins to soften, the doubt begins to fade, and the feminine soul begins to trust that maybe, just maybe, she was never too much. She was just waiting to be seen. She tells you she doesn't need anyone, and the thing is, she means it. That look in her eyes when she says it, that isn't for show, that's earned, through years of learning to carry herself, through moments where she had no choice but to stand alone. She has been her own anchor more times than she can count. She's had to build her life from the inside out, brick by careful brick, with no guarantee anyone would show up to help. So when she says she doesn't need you, believe her. But don't make the mistake of thinking that means she doesn't want you, because this is where it gets complicated. This is where the sacred tension begins to hum just beneath the surface. Jung called it the tension of opposites, the natural polarity within the psyche, the push and pull between seemingly contradictory needs that exist not to cancel each other out, but to lead us toward wholeness. For her, one of those deepest tensions lives between sovereignty and surrender. She wants to be seen as capable, competent, unshakable, and she is. Her independence isn't performative, it's foundational. She's spent years cultivating it. She knows how to pay her own bills, soothe her own anxiety, navigate her own heartbreak. She's her own sanctuary. But within that same woman, sometimes right next to that strength, is a longing she rarely names. A longing to be held, to be chosen, to rest, not because she's weak, but because she's tired of always being strong. This isn't a contradiction. This is the feminine in motion. The anima, Jung's word for the inner feminine, is both fierce and fluid. It dances between power and vulnerability, desire and distance. She isn't linear. She doesn't move in a straight line. And if you're waiting for her to pick a side, either strong or soft, sovereign or surrendered, you'll miss the entire point. She doesn't want to be either/or. She wants to be both. And she wants to know if you can handle that. Because the moment she senses you only want her when she's agreeable, or only respect her when she's stoic, she'll retreat. Not as a game, but as self-preservation. Because she's been in spaces where she had to choose between being loved and being whole, and she's not doing that again. So when she lets you in, when she trusts you enough to ask for help or to lean on you or to cry in your arms, that's not weakness. That's courage. That's a woman who has built her life on self-reliance and is now taking the terrifying risk of intimacy. She's saying, here I am in all my contradiction. Can you meet me here? Can you hold the paradox? And you'll feel it in the way she relates to you. Sometimes she'll pull you close, touch your face like she's memorizing it. Other times she'll need space, silence, solitude. Not because she's pulling away emotionally, but because she's returning to her center. Don't take that distance personally. Respect it. Understand that her independence is not a wall, it's a rhythm of self-regulation, of coming home to herself so she can return to you not from emptiness, but from fullness. The sacred tension she carries is not your problem to solve, it's your invitation to witness. If you try to fix it, if you push her toward one side, demand more vulnerability when she needs space, or expect distance when she's softening, you'll disrupt the very process that makes her who she is. Jung taught that integration doesn't mean erasing parts of ourselves. It means holding them, letting them coexist, letting the contradictions breathe. And that's what she needs from you, not a solution, but space. Not pressure, but presence. Because when you see her strength and still make room for her softness, You are offering her a kind of love that doesn't force her to fragment. And that is rare. She doesn't want to be the strong one all the time. She doesn't want to always be the one holding it together. But she also doesn't want to be rescued. She doesn't need to be saved. She needs to be seen. For all of it. The way she can take control and also collapse into your chest. The way she makes decisions with fire in her eyes and still wants to be held while she falls asleep. When you honor both without making either one wrong, you become more than a partner. You become a mirror, a reflection that says, you don't have to split yourself in half to be loved here. You get to be whole, complicated, glorious. She'll test you, not to be cruel, but to feel out your capacity. She'll watch how you respond when she pulls back. She'll notice whether you tighten your grip when she needs space. And in those moments, you'll have a choice. To let your own fear hijack the connection, or to stand still and say, I trust you, I trust your rhythm. And when she sees that, when she sees you can hold her without trying to control her, she'll relax into the space between you. That sacred space where independence and intimacy are no longer at war, but in dance. A dance that doesn't follow predictable steps. A dance that flows in a language only the soul understands. This is where love becomes alchemy. Where you're not just relating to her personality, you're engaging her wholeness. You become the rare man who doesn't just tolerate her contradictions but reveres them, who doesn't just enjoy her power but bows to it, who doesn't just take her softness but protects it like something sacred. And in that, she'll offer you a kind of intimacy that can't be manufactured, a depth that only arises when someone feels fully safe, fully seen, fully honored, because you didn't ask her to choose. You didn't demand she shrink. He'd stood steady in the fire of her opposite and loved her through it. And that, Jung would say, is the beginning of integration, the moment when the fragmented soul stops splitting itself to survive and begins to trust that wholeness won't cost it connection. She may not say thank you with words, but you'll see it in the way she opens, in the way her body softens next to yours, in the way she lets you hold her without apology. That is the reward of standing in the sacred tension. That is the gift of loving a woman who no longer has to choose between needing no one and longing to be met. When she walks into the room, what do you notice first? Is it the way her hair falls across her shoulders? The way her eyes flicker with thought, scanning the space before she speaks? Or is it something more subtle? The hesitation in her step, the pause before she takes a seat, the slight tension in her jaw that tells you, if you're paying attention, that she's holding something back. Most people never see it. They see her presence, maybe, her style, her smile. They comment on the obvious, how she looks, how she carries herself, how she lights up a conversation. But those aren't the things that tell you who she really is. Jung said that transformation begins with attention, but not just any attention, not the kind you give without intention, without depth, not the kind that scans and categorizes. He meant the kind of attention that sees not just with the eyes, but with the soul. Because the feminine doesn't want to be watched. She wants to be witnessed. And there is a world of difference between the two. To be watched is to be observed, measured, consumed. It's the kind of attention she's learned to attract, and also the kind she's learned to fear. It reduces her to a surface, a shape, a role, and it demands that she perform to keep that attention, that she stay pleasing, polished, predictable. But to be witnessed, that's holy. That's when someone sees the pauses, not just the performances, the way she folds into herself when she's unsure, the way her energy shifts when the room feels too loud or the silence stretches too long. It's seeing the shadow behind her smile and choosing not to look away. That's the kind of attention that builds intimacy, not because it flatters her, but because it frees her. Most people don't know how to give that. They're too busy filling the space with noise, too busy projecting their own desires onto her to ever notice what's real. But if you want to touch her soul, if you want to know her, not just possess her, you need to learn how to notice. Not the way the world notices, not for aesthetics or status, but for truth. The truth lives in her eyes when she looks away mid-sentence, suddenly unsure if she's said too much. It lives in her hands when they tremble, just slightly, as she pours out something raw. It lives in her silences. The ones that ache to be filled, but only with understanding. If you're paying attention, you'll realize that her body is speaking even when her lips are silent. But you have to listen differently. You have to quiet your own mind long enough to feel her, not figure her out. Feel her. There's a difference. Trying to figure her out puts you in the role of the analyzer, the fixer, the observer. But feeling her, truly being with her, that makes you a witness, a partner, a mirror. Jung understood that the unconscious communicates through symbols, gestures, emotions, not logic. And the feminine, the anima, resides deeply in that unconscious terrain, which means if you want to know her, really know her, you have to slow down. You have to shift your focus from what's obvious to what's emerging. She'll test you with it without even realizing it. She'll offer you slivers of truth in the way she lowers her voice, in the stories she almost tells. She'll mention something in passing, not to see if you heard it, but to see if you felt it. And if you don't catch it, if you brush past it, she won't blame you. But she will retreat. Because she's been there before. She's risked being vulnerable only to be met with blank eyes, distracted hands, half-hearted nods. She's been brave enough to show her undercurrents and learn the hard way that most people only swim on the surface. So now she waits. She waits for someone who notices, not just her curves or her charisma, but the moment her laugh falters, the way her eyes glaze over when she's holding back tears, the way she gets quieter, not louder, when she's overwhelmed. She's waiting for someone whose attention isn't rooted in desire, but in reverence. And if you become that person, if your attention is steady, non-demanding, honest, you'll see her start to unfold, slowly, cautiously, beautifully. Your non-state, because when a woman feels seen in her subtlety, her defenses don't just come down, they melt, not because you said all the right things, but because your presence made her feel like she didn't have to hide anymore. Your gaze can either make her feel like she's on display or like she's come home. It depends on what you're really looking for. Are you trying to decode her, conquer her, fit her into your story? Or are you willing to enter hers? Are you willing to sit in the spaces she doesn't know how to fill yet, the ones she's still learning to name? Are you willing to notice the parts of her that even she's afraid to look at? Because when you do, something extraordinary happens. She begins to see herself more clearly. That's the real power of attention. It's not about giving her your eyes. It's about giving her your presence. And when your presence reflects her worth back to her, without needing her to entertain, to impress, to perform, she begins to soften, to trust, to show you more. Not more of what the world wants, but more of what's real. You'll hear it in her voice. It will change. Lower, slower. You'll see it in her body, the way it relaxes, the way her shoulders drop as she exhales. Not because you fixed her, but because for the first time in a long time, she feels safe. Safe to just be. Safe to take up space without apologizing for it. And that's when you meet her. Not the mask. Not the version she's curated for approval. But her. Raw. Radiant. Real. That moment is rare, sacred, and it only comes when someone is willing to notice not just what's visible, but what's vulnerable. That's the kind of attention that heals, the kind that transforms, the kind that says, You don't have to shine to be worthy. I see you even in your shadows. And when she believes that, when she feels that down in her bones, you won't just be another person she dated, talked to, or let in for a while. You'll be the one who made her feel real, because your attention didn't ask her to perform. It invited her to belong. She'll pull away when you least expect it. Maybe right after she's laughed with you, touched your face, or let you see some tender part of her heart. Maybe after a weekend that felt perfect, you'll think everything is fine, more than fine. But then you'll feel it, the shift. She'll go quiet, withdraw a little. Not with anger, not with blame, just distance. And if you're not careful, you'll think it's about you. You'll wonder if you said something wrong, if she's changed her mind, if her feelings have vanished overnight. This isn't about you. This is about the silent war she's fighting with herself. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of the psyche where all the pieces we've rejected, suppressed, or disowned live in exile. For her, that shadow is often shaped not by personal failure, but by the collective unconscious, by the ideals and images of who she's supposed to be, the standards she never agreed to, but somehow still lives by. So when she questions why you love her, when she pulls back even in the warmth of your affection, she's not doubting your sincerity. She's wondering how you could love someone she's still learning to accept. Because no matter how much she tries to believe she's enough, the world is always whispering otherwise. It whispers through the faces on magazine covers, through the curated lives on social media, through the way people praise her for her looks before her wisdom, for her softness before her strength. And slowly, those whispers become internalized. They become the voice that tells her she should have a flatter stomach, a quieter laugh, a more composed life. They become the ache that rises when she sees someone who seems more graceful, more effortless, more worthy. It doesn't matter how many times you tell her she's beautiful. It doesn't matter how often you show up, how sincerely you love her. That ache doesn't come from your absence. It comes from the weight she carries inside, the weight of never feeling quite right, never feeling quite enough. And here's what's hardest to accept. You can't fix that. You can't reason her out of it. You can't logic her into wholeness, because her doubt isn't rooted in your behavior. It's rooted in her unconscious. And the unconscious doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks in symbols, in emotion, in inherited stories. She might never say it out loud, but every day she's comparing herself to ghosts, images of perfection that live in her psyche like unwelcome tenants. Jung believed that these ideals aren't just cultural, they're archetypal. They're patterns passed down through generations, telling her who she should be and how far she's fallen short. So even when she's standing in front of you, radiant in her truth, there's a shadow behind her. And sometimes it's that shadow you're really in conversation with. Sometimes it's that shadow that tells her your love must be temporary, that it's based on a version of her that doesn't exist, that the real her, messy, emotional, imperfect, will eventually be too much. She's not trying to hurt you. She's trying to survive in a world that taught her her worth was conditional. Conditional on beauty, on likability, on silence. And you, with all your love and sincerity, are challenging that narrative just by staying. You're telling her she doesn't have to be perfect to be loved. And that terrifies her. Because if she lets herself believe that, truly believe it, then she has to let go of the old story, the one that says she's only as good as her last compliment, her last achievement, her last act of caretaking, the one that says her value is something she earns, not something she is. Letting go of that story would mean stepping into the unknown, into a kind of love she's never been taught to trust. So sometimes she retreats, not because she doesn't care, but because caring this much means she has something to lose. And the shadow doesn't go quietly. It clings, it whispers. It shows her every woman she's not, every life she isn't living. Every flaw she's been told is a fatal one. And in those moments, your job isn't to argue with her fear. It's to stay, to hold your ground, not with force, but with gentleness. Not with answers, but with presence. Because the most powerful antidote to shadow is light, not the kind that blinds or corrects, but the kind that illuminates with warmth and patience, the kind that says, even when you can't see yourself clearly, I can, and I'm not going anywhere. And you show her that her worth isn't based on what she hides, but on who she is. Even in the grip of comparison, you offer her something revolutionary. You offer her safety, not safety from the world, but safety from herself. Because her deepest fear isn't that you'll leave. It's that once you see all of her, the doubts, the jealousies, the places where she still aches, you'll realize she's not the woman you imagined. But if you can meet her in that raw space and still choose her, if you can witness her comparing herself and not get defensive, not pull away, not try to silence it, you give her something the world never could. You give her permission to stop measuring, to stop performing, to stop apologizing for being a work in progress. And over time, that presence rewrites the narrative. Not instantly, not completely, but enough. Enough that she starts to see herself through your eyes, and not through the lens of who she isn't, but of who she is. Enough that she begins to trust that love doesn't always come with a scoreboard. Enough that the shadow quiets, even if just for a moment. Because she'll never be untouched by those comparisons. That's not how healing works. Jung never promised that our shadows disappear. He taught that they must be integrated, acknowledged, honored, seen. And when she feels your love holding her, not in spite of her shadows, but alongside them, she begins to integrate. She begins to believe. And that belief is fragile at first. But it grows. It grows each time you stay when she pulls back. Each time you remind her, through action, not just words, that your love isn't based on her being the most beautiful woman in the room, or the most composed, or the most anything. It's based on her being her. All of her, even the parts still learning to be loved. She looks like she has it all together. The way she walks into the room, graceful, confident, carrying a calm that seems unshakable. She remembers birthdays, she shows up on time, she holds space for everyone else's chaos. She's the one people lean on, the one who fixes things, smooths things over, makes it all look effortless. But look closer. Look beneath the surface, beneath the smile she's practiced, beneath the polished tone in her voice. There's something quieter there, something heavier. Exhaustion. Not just from being busy, but from carrying too much for too long. The weight she bears isn't just from her daily life, it's from the roles she was handed before she could ever consent to them, the expectations that came before language, the silent agreements passed down from mothers, grandmothers, from culture, from the collective unconscious itself. Jung warned us about this. He taught that the archetypes we live by can either guide us toward wholeness or become cages. They can reflect our potential or trap us in a pattern we mistake for identity. For her, the good woman archetype is often that cage. Be nurturing, be kind, be soft but not weak, be strong but not too intimidating, be sexy but modest, be ambitious but never threatening, be everything all at once, and never let anyone see you sweat. She's internalized these messages so deeply she may not even realize they're not her own. They feel like instinct, like truth, so she pushes herself harder. She holds back her truth so others don't feel uncomfortable. She says yes when she's screaming no inside. And every time someone compliments her composure, it reinforces the belief that her worth lies in being untouchable. But she's not untouchable. She is human. And being human means there are days she wants to fall apart, to stop being the one everyone depends on, to put down the mask and say, I'm tired, I don't want to be strong today. The problem is, the world rarely gives her permission to say that. And when you praise her perfection, even with the best intentions, what she often hears isn't love, it's pressure. It's a reminder that the only version of her that's safe to show is the polished one, the composed one, the one who never falters. But underneath it all is a woman who is aching to be held, not for what she does, but for who she is when she's not doing anything. She may never tell you this directly, she may not even have the words, but she'll show you in subtle ways, in the way she hesitates before asking for help, in the way she downplays her pain, in the way she laughs off her needs like they're inconveniences. She's testing the waters. She wants to know if you'll still be there when she stops performing. Because that's what perfection has become. A performance, a survival strategy, an armor she never chose but learned to wear because the world punished her for being messy, emotional, complicated. So if you want to touch her heart, don't admire the armor. See the weight of it. See how heavy it is to carry other people's expectations while denying her own desires. See how lonely it is to be strong for everyone else and have no one strong for her. She doesn't need you to fix it. She needs you to witness it, to create a space where she can fall apart without being judged, a space where she doesn't have to be on, where she doesn't have to hold it all together just to be loved. That kind of space is rare, but it's the space where real intimacy begins. Because when a woman feels safe enough to shed the roles the world assigned her, what emerges is not weakness. It's truth. It's the version of her she's been hiding, not because it's broken, but because it's tender, unpolished, still learning how to be seen without shame. And that version of her is a gift, but only if you can meet it without flinching, without needing her to shrink herself to keep you comfortable, without expecting her to be the fantasy that makes you feel safe. This is where the real work begins, not for her, but for you. Can you sit with her in her rawness? Can you love the parts of her that don't serve anyone else? Can you see her, not just the woman who shows up for everyone, but the one who sometimes wants to be carried? Jung said that individuation, the journey to wholeness, requires us to face the parts of ourselves we've hidden, and she's been hiding behind strength for so long, she may not remember what softness feels like. Your presence can help her remember, not by rescuing her, not by taking over, but by staying, by holding a mirror up to her truth and saying, I see you, you don't have to be perfect for me. And when you do that consistently, when you show her she can be loved in process, you give her something she may have never received before, permission to rest without guilt, without performance, without fear that the moment she slips, she'll be seen as less. And in that rest, something beautiful begins to grow. Trust. Not the kind that comes from grand gestures or words, the kind that is earned, slowly, in silence, the kind that says, I don't love your perfection, I love your presence. Over time, she'll start to take off the armor. Not all at once, not in some dramatic unveiling, but piece by piece, in the way she opens up, in the way she stops apologizing, in the way she lets herself be seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. That's not just love, that's healing. And it begins when someone finally looks at her and doesn't see a role to admire, but a soul to understand. Because the truth is, she's not asking to be put on a pedestal, she's asking to be met, to be held in the messy, magnificent middle ground between who she's told to be and who she truly is. If you can meet her there, not with answers but with presence, you'll discover something most men never do. That her strength is not what makes her beautiful, it's her willingness to let go of it. If someone gives her a safe place to land,